Coming in at a number 10 spot, we have the Fukushima nuclear power plant. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in Japan experienced a catastrophic disaster in 2011 after a powerful earthquake and tsunami hit the region. The damage caused the cooling systems of the reactors to fail, putting them in danger of a meltdown. Although Fukushima Daini was shut down in 2 days, the Daiichi plant was not as fortunate. The disaster resulted in 3 nuclear meltdowns, explosions, and even the release of radioactive material in the surrounding areas, which resulted to the Pacific Ocean being heavily contaminated. The Fukushima disaster is considered the most significant incident of its kind, and second only to our number 1 entry. The disaster had a far-reaching impact as it led to a 4-stage evacuation order, affecting thousands of people who lived nearby. Many people lost their homes and were forced to relocate due to the dangerous levels of radiation. But despite the disaster, the Japanese government continued to operate other nuclear power plants in the country. And if you look at it on a much grander scale, nuclear energy is the cleanest. Although many of you guys would like to deny that, it is. But regardless, these type of disasters is the main reason for us looking towards renewable energy sources, with Japan increasing its investment in solar, wind, and all other forms of clean energy. The aftermath of the Fukushima disaster is still being felt today. The region continues to grapple with the environmental and health impacts of the disaster, while the plant itself remains a major concern in the region. At a number 9 spot, we have the Hanford site. Hanford nuclear site in eastern Washington, one of the 3 sites that made up the government's covert Manhattan Project, is the most contaminated place in the United States, if not the world. The facility produced plutonium for the atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki. Today, it is home to 56 million gallons of nuclear waste, leaking storage tanks, and contaminated soil. Hanford is an environmental disaster and a catastrophe in waiting, writes journalist Joshua Frank in his new book, Atomic Days, The Untold Story of the Most Toxic Place in America. Hanford is shrouded in secrecy, which began with the Manhattan Program, and even now, it's still very much like a covert operation because of the dangers that exist with the potential for an attack on one of the nuclear waste tanks. Hanford is also the costliest environmental project the world has ever seen. The known environmental dangers of Hanford include 177 underground tanks that hold about 56 million gallons of nuclear waste, as I mentioned before, 67 of which have been leaked in the past into groundwater that feeds into the Columbia River. Coming in at a number 8 spot, we have the elephant's foot. In 1986, a catastrophic nuclear accident occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine. 8 months later, workers discovered a startling phenomenon, a black lava that had flowed from the reactor core, resembling a human-made volcano. One hardened mass in particular was particularly shocking and was nicknamed the elephant's foot because it resembled the foot of the massive mammal. The lava formation was found to be so highly radioactive that it would just take 5 minutes for a person to receive a lethal amount of exposure. The elephant's foot weighs an estimated 2.2 tons and is known as lava-like fuel containing material. It has remained a macabre object of fascination since its discovery. The elephant's foot is composed of a rare substance called corium, which is produced in a nuclear accident where nuclear fuel and parts of the reactor core structures overheat and melt, forming this weird mixture. Corium has only been formed naturally 5 times in history. Once during the 3 Mile Island accident in Pennsylvania in 1979, once at Chernobyl, and 3 times at the Fukushima Daiichi plant disaster in Japan in 2011. It's said that everyone who came in contact with the foot passed away shortly after. However, to this day, this is not confirmed. And also, there's no way of getting rid of it, so it's just laying there forever, waiting for its next victims to come across. Number 7, the Siberian Chemical Combine. The Siberian chemical compound in Seversk, Russia was established to produce weapons-grade plutonium and highly enriched uranium on a massive scale. The plant is located in a closed town, requiring access documents to be shown at every single checkpoint. The top 7 reprocessing complex at the plant was the site of one of Russia's worst nuclear accidents in 1993. During the cleaning of a tank with nitric acid, it overheated and caused a large explosion, severely radiating the plant and significantly raising levels of radioactivity in the surrounding areas. Although the facility's plutonium and uranium production capabilities were shut down after the accident, the isolated and remote plant continues to store low and intermediate levels of nuclear waste for weapons and radioactive waste. The plant's location within a closed town and the lack of oversight from government agencies raises concerns about the safety of nuclear materials stored at the site, and some say that even walking in this place for 30 to 50 minutes is enough to end your life. So just beware if you're ever in Russia for whatever reason. Number 6, we're back to Russia with Mayak, Russia. In the far-flung reaches of Russia's northeast lies the industrial complex complex of Mayak, home to a nuclear power plant that has been operating for decades. But the legacy of Mayak is far from one of progress and advancement. In fact, it has become synonymous with disaster and environmental devastation. In 1957, Mayak was the site of one of the world's worst nuclear accidents, when an explosion released up to 100 tons of radioactive waste into surrounding areas, contaminating it for decades to come. The explosion was kept under wraps by Soviet officials until the 1980s, when the true extent of the damage was finally revealed to the public. But the disaster at Mayak was not an isolated incident. Starting in the 1950s, waste from the nuclear power plant was dumped into surrounding areas and into the nearby lake Karachay, leading to the contamination of the water supply that thousands of people relied on daily. Over 400,000 people had been exposed to radiation from the plant as a result of the various serious incidents that have occurred here, including fires, deadly dust storms, you name it. The aftermath of Mayak's nuclear plant has left a legacy of environmental devastation and human suffering in the area, and it's really sad just to know that this all actually happened. In the hub for our list, we have Lake Karachay. Lake Karachay was once the most contaminated body of water on Earth due to radioactive pollution. It was located near the Mayak Production Association, which was a nuclear facility that was established in 1945 as the primary production facility for the Soviet nuclear weapons program. The plant's crude reactors were designed to create weapons-grade isotopes with little regard for safety. The contaminated waste was initially dumped into the nearby Teka River, which led to dangerously high levels of radiation in communities downriver of the plant. In 1951, the worst of the waste was diverted to Lake Karachay, and this practice continued until the 1990s. The radioactivity of the lake is both in its water and in the layer of radioactive sludge that lines the lake bed. Measurements taken by the same group of scientists found that the earth around the lake had a specific activity of 740,000 megabecquerel per kilogram. And that just by standing near the shore, you'd be exposed to a dose of 5.6 sievert per hour. The lake began to be filled and concreted over in the mid-1990s, with the project wrapping up in 2015. However, the damage had been already done, and the legacy of the catastrophe will endure for centuries. Number 4, the polygon. The vast and desolate region of modern-day Kazakhstan was once used by the Soviet Union for nuclear weapons testing. Despite being home to over 700,000 people, the area was deemed uninhabited by Soviet officials, making it the perfect location for the USSR's atomic bomb program. The nuclear site was where the USSR detonated its first nuclear bomb, marking the beginning of a dark chapter in history that saw the largest concentration of nuclear explosions ever recorded. Over a period of 40 years, from 1949 to 1989, the facility saw a staggering 456 nuclear tests as the USSR sought to flex its military might on the world stage. But the impact of the testing and its devastating effects on the environment and human health were kept under wraps from the public, with the Soviets only revealing the extent of the radiation exposure when the facility was closed down in 1991. The consequences of the Soviet Union's nuclear ambitions has been far-reaching, with an estimated 200,000 people suffering from the direct health effects of radiation exposure. The desire to destroy foreign nations has left a dark legacy of nuclear contamination hanging over the heads of those who were once citizens of the USSR. Number 3, Goiânia, Brazil. In 1987, a seemingly routine break-in at an abandoned hospital in Goiânia, Brazil ended up causing a devastating tragedy. Two robbers looking for scrap metal stumbled upon a small capsule of highly radioactive cesium chloride, which had been used in a radiotherapy device. The robbers unknowingly took the dangerous material with them, spreading the radiation throughout the entire city. Tragically, 4 people lost their lives as a result of the radiation exposure. The contamination spread very quickly, and several city blocks had been demolished due to the high levels of radiation. In total, over 300 people suffered from radioactive contamination, and radiophobia swept through the entire city. More than 100,000 people were queued to be screened for radiation exposure, fearing the worst. To combat the radiation, topsoil was removed from several contaminated sites, including schools, homes, and hospitals. Levels as high as 2 sieverts an hour were found in some locations, which is 200 times the annual dose limit for workers in the nuclear industry. It took months to decontaminate the affected areas, and even today, some parts of the city still remain contaminated. Number 2, Somalia's coast. Organized crime and nuclear waste may not seem like they go hand in hand, but in Somalia, it's a different story. Over a period of years, an Italian crime syndicate called the 'Ndrangheta allegedly loaded ships with nuclear waste and then sank them off the coast of Somalia and other developing African countries. This has contaminated the water and caused long-term damage to the environment. For background information, Somalia has been in a state of civil war for many years, which has prevented the formation of a strong government. This means that illegal dumping of nuclear waste was able to go unnoticed for many years, starting in the 1980s. Swiss and Italian companies are thought to have used the area as a dumping ground for years, and as a result, the waters surrounding the coast of Somalia are reportedly highly toxic and radioactive. The dumping has caused damage to the environment and to the people who are living in the area, with many cities and other small towns having to completely abandon their homes because of the deadly effects of radiation. There's even been rumors that the dumping is still going on, so it looks like this will pose a bigger and bigger threat as time goes by. Number 1, Chernobyl. We all knew this one was going to be on this list. The Chernobyl disaster of 1986 was one of the most devastating nuclear accidents in history. It occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear plant in Ukraine and resulted from a combination of flawed reactor design and human error. The disaster led to acute radiation syndrome in at least 237 people on site. Although nobody off-site suffered from acute radiation effects, large areas of Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia and beyond were contaminated in varying degrees. The Chernobyl disaster was a unique event in the history of commercial nuclear power where radiation-related facilities occurred. The reactor's design was unique, and the accident is thus of little relevance to the rest of the nuclear industry outside the Eastern Bloc. However, it has led to major changes in safety culture and industry cooperation, particularly between the East and West before the end of the Soviet Union. At our number 10 spot, we have the Phantom of the Opera. The Phantom of the Opera is a well-known legend that is closely linked to the history of the Opera Garnier in Paris. This legend originated from a fire that occurred in the Salle Pelletier, the predecessor of the Opera Garnier, in 1873. A pianist named Ernest was horribly disfigured in the fire and lost his companion as a result. Overcome with grief, he chose to isolate himself from the world and even took refuge in the basement of this place, which was still under construction at the time. Ernest spent the remainder of his life in the shadows of this building and only ate fish from the underground lake of the opera. His sorrowful cries could be heard in the background of performances, as many guests would report. After his disappearance, strange events started to occur in the Opera Garnier. For example, a machinist was found hanged, but when they did investigation, there was no rope to be found. And also, a chandelier fell during one performance, killing a spectator seated in the seat number 13. All these mysterious occurrences were attributed to the Phantom of the Opera, who is believed to still haunt the halls of the famous theater. These mysteries have captured the imaginations of many writers, including Gaston Leroux. He wrote the novel The Phantom of the Opera in 1910, which was a worldwide success and largely based on this legend. Even today, the legend continues to live on as Lodge number 5 in Opera Garnier is permanently rented by a mysterious stranger. This lodge is strategically located within the theater, allowing its occupant to see the performances but remain unseen. At our number 9 spot, we have the Beast of Gévaudan. The Beast of Gévaudan remains one of the most intriguing and mysterious legends in French history. The terror caused by this man-eating beast or beast lasted for 3 years, from 1764 all the way to 1767. The attacks took place in the Margeride Mountains of south central France and spanned over an area of 90 by 80 kilometers. Eyewitnesses reported that the beast was formidable with sharp teeth and an immense tail. The descriptions of the animal also varied widely, with some saying it was a striped hyena, while others claimed it was like a large wolf, dog, or even a wolf-dog hybrid. Regardless of its actual appearance, the Beast of Gévaudan was known for its brutal methods of attack, which often involved tearing out the throats of its victims. The Kingdom of France took threat to this beast very seriously and even devoted a significant amount of manpower and wealth to hunting this animal down. The resources of several nobles, soldiers, and royal huntsmen, and even civilians were used in the pursuit of this beast. But despite their efforts, the attacks persisted and the number of victims continued to rise. The exact number of victims is not known, but estimates suggest that the beast killed and injured hundreds of people. Although the beast was reported killed several times, the attacks did not stop until 1767. To this day, the identity of the Beast of Gévaudan remains a mystery, and its legends continue to captivate people's imaginations, and if there was really a man-eating beast in France during this time. At our number 8 spot, we have the father of cinematography. Louis Le Prince is a name that should ring a bell to all those into cinema, as he is widely regarded as the true father of cinematography. However, despite his monumental contribution to the world of motion pictures, his name is often overshadowed by figures like Thomas Edison and the Lumiere brothers. The reason for this is that Le Prince disappeared before he could showcase his groundbreaking invention to the world. In 1888, Le Prince shot the first film in history in Leeds, England. However, instead of rushing to show the world what he created, he chose to be patient and refine his invention. After 2 years of careful tweaking, he was finally ready to present his work to the public. Then in September 1890, he boarded a train to Paris with all the materials and patents he needed for the showcase. But unfortunately, he never made it to the French capital. His friends were waiting in Paris to pick him up, but they found no trace of him. This mystery sparked many rumors and theories about what could have happened to Le Prince. Some people said that his brother Albert killed him over their inheritance, while others believed that he drowned himself or just decided to fled to start a new life. But the most tantalizing theory was that Thomas Edison himself was behind Le Prince's disappearance, as he wanted to ensure his monopoly over the invention of cinema. Despite the many theories surrounding his disappearance, one thing is for certain: Louis Le Prince left a lasting impact on the world of motion pictures and will forever be known, at least for me, as a visionary inventor. All the way at our number 7 spot, we have the murdered monks. The Abbaye de Montemeur is a 12th century monastery located in Normandy, France, and it is considered by many to be one of the most haunted places in the country as well. The story of Mortimer Abbey begins with the Cistercian monks who built the monastery on marshy land that was referred to as the Dead Pond, a name that would eventually become the moniker for the abbey itself. Despite the monastery's size and grandeur, it was often plagued by financial difficulties, which ultimately led to its downfall. By the time of the French Revolution, the abbey was in a state of disrepair, but a small community of monks still lived within its walls. However, their presence was not enough to save them from the wrath of the revolutionaries, who decided to storm the abbey in 1790, killing 4 monks who lived there and leaving a scene of blood and chaos behind. Since then, the abbey has been the site of numerous ghostly sightings, with rumors of ghostly monks haunting the ruins. Fortunately, there has even been accounts of a benevolent ghost there, dressed in the robes of a monk, appearing during World War II and even saving an English paratrooper from an enemy attack. And if you decide to visit, there's a higher chance you'll probably encounter one of the more angered spirits of the 4 murdered monks, but let's just hope you encounter this one. Number 6, the Mont Saint-Michel. The Mont Saint-Michel, a settlement located on the border of Brittany and Normandy, is a place of both beauty and terror. This majestic fortress built on an island is surrounded by the sea, which makes it a popular tourist destination, but this fairy tale-like location still has a dark and haunting side to it. According to the legend, the island was discovered when Saint Albert received a dream from Archangel Michael, directing him to build a monastery there. Despite initially disregarding the vision, the Archangel burned a hole in the bishop's head to reinforce the message, and the monastery was built. The island has been a place of worship and pilgrimage for centuries and has been the subject of many myths and ghost stories over the years as well. The island is known for their Battle of Mont Saint-Michel, one of the bloodiest days in French history. It is said that the wails of English soldiers who lost their lives during the war can still be heard on calm days with low tides. Many people believe that the souls of these soldiers are unable to rest and continue to haunt the island, never moving to the afterlife. Before the French Revolution, the island was inhabited by monks and other pious people who decided to bury their dead in the walls of the church. When the revolution reached Mont Saint-Michel, the monks were forced to abandon the island, and the abbey was then turned into a prison. Some say that the ghosts of the dead monks who were disturbed by the desecration of their once sacred location still roam the island as well. And the hump of our list, we have the Jack and Jill nursery rhyme. As you already know, nursery rhymes' origins aren't as charming as their true story. One of these is the Jack and Jill nursery rhyme. It has 2 popular interpretations. One is tied to the French Revolution, and the other one is tied to King Charles I of England. In the first interpretation, Jack represents King Louis XVI of France, and Jill represents Queen Mary Antoinette. The rhyme tells the story of their execution during the Reign of Terror in 1793. But in the second interpretation, the rhyme revolves around King Charles I's attempt to increase taxes on liquid measures. The standard volume of Jack was reduced and the tax remained the same. A gill, which was twice the volume of a Jack, was also reduced as a result. The volume mark on the standard Jack measure was indicated with a crown, and the reduction of the volume caused the crown mark to fall, leading to the lyrics, Jack fell down and broke his crown.
Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after.
Number 4, the worst barber ever. Travel back in time to medieval Paris and the Ile de la Cite. when a barber was known to frequently receive foreign students who were housed by neighboring canons. Unfortunately, some of these young students would then vanish without a trace. In those days of widespread poverty and frequent attacks, it was believed that these students were victims of a violent crime, and with no family left in Paris to inquire about their disappearance, their fate was left to speculation. However, one day, an unusual incident changed the course of events. A dog was barking loudly in front of a barber's door for several days, and its master, a German student, had not returned from his appointment. The police were then called in to investigate and made a shocking discovery. The barber was cutting the throats of his young clients, then disposing of their bodies through a trap door in the cellar of the pastry chef next door. It was said that the pastry chef used the bodies to make some of the best pies in all of Paris. The barber and pastry chef paid the price for their crimes, and they were burned alive in a public square. Their houses were razed to the ground, and today the former site of the bakery is used as a garage for the Paris police. Number 3, the haunted lighthouse at Thévenet. Despite its picturesque location on the coast, the Thévenet lighthouse was notorious for the tales of madness and death that surrounded the 23 lighthouse operators who lived and worked there before it was automated in 1910. The area around the lighthouse has a rich maritime history and was known for their frequent shipwrecks that occurred there, including the crash of the French ship Sedusant during the Napoleonic Wars, which led to the death of hundreds of sailors. According to local legends, the area is also haunted by the spirits of the Celtic seafarers and warriors, who has been said to haunt the lighthouse since its inception. The tales of madness that befell the lighthouse operators are particularly eerie. The first operator, Henry Guzenick, was reportedly driven to madness by ghostly voices that spoke to him in the Breton language and told him to leave the lighthouse every single day. One of these successors are said to have had similar experiences, leading the French government to make Thévenet a two-man lighthouse and even recruited married couples to work there. However, few couples were willing to live and work at this lighthouse, for obvious reasons, and those that did suffered untimely and tragic deaths, including a family with 3 children and a cow.
Well, it's not relevant, is it?
The story surrounding the Thévenet lighthouse is filled with the tales of failed exorcisms, crucifixes installed to ward off evil spirits, and even a violent storm that arrived just as one of the operators were giving birth inside of the lighthouse. So definitely one of the places in France that you don't want to visit. Number 2, the encounter of Marius de Wilde. The French commune of Quaraubel made headlines in September 10, 1954, when a local railway worker named Marius de Wilde claimed to have been visited by extraterrestrials. According to the reports, de Wilde claimed that a cigar-shaped UFO landed near his garden, and 2 small creatures in spacesuits resembling dive costumes emerged. The UFO shot a beam of light that paralyzed de Wilde, and by the time he was recovered, the aliens are already getting ready to leave. Despite an investigation by the authorities that found unusual marks on the railway tracks, there was no concrete evidence of an alien encounter. The stories of de Wilde's experience with the extraterrestrials quickly was widespread and reached the wine-producing village of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, located hundreds of miles from Quaraubel. The local mayor and town council were keen to protect their citizens and vineyards from potential alien invaders, and as a result, they passed a municipal decree that banned all UFOs from landing, taking off, or flying over the community. Which is definitely strange, but I guess the UFOs listened, because ever since they made this decree, they haven't seen one since. Number 1, the ghost of Pont-Marie. The City of Love is also the city of spine-chilling ghost stories, one of which stems from the era of France during World War II. This period saw the division of France into 2 parts, one directly occupied by the Germans and the other being a puppet state by them. However, amidst the hardship and turmoil, a brave woman rose to the occasion and joined the French resistance. This Parisian lady was married to a resistance fighter and was tasked with collecting information from an SS officer, with whom she started an affair. One fateful winter night, she was scheduled to meet her husband on Pont-Marie Bridge, which spans across the River Seine, but he ended up never arriving. Understanding that something was amiss, the woman wept, waiting through the nights until she eventually froze to death. Ever since, reports have surfaced of her ghost appearing on cold nights on this bridge, still crying and waiting for her husband to show up.
Starting off at number 10, Loch Ness Monster. Of course, Nessie has to come first.
From the beginning, it was Nessie who wanted me there.
Nessie? You nicknamed my daughter after the Loch Ness Monster?
Almost everyone knows the story of the monster in the lake that people have been trying to spot for thousands of years. The first recorded spotting was in 565, but few have actually seen it. The world took an interest in this myth in the 1930s, when the first photograph was released claiming that this was the Loch Ness Monster. In 1933, Alec Campbell reported a sighting by Aldi McKay of what she believed to be Nessie. Mr. Campbell's report described a whale-like creature in the loch's waters, cascading and churning. Then in 1934, a British surgeon, Colonel Robert Wilson, claimed he took a photograph of the monster while driving along the northern shore of Loch Ness. I mean, we have only discovered like 5% of the water on Earth, so maybe there's something lurking deep down, but what do you guys think? Is she real? Is she all just a hoax? Now at number 9, Robin Hood. Legend has it Robin Hood was an outlaw living in the Sherwood Forest with his merry men. The first known literary reference to Robin Hood and his men was in 1377, and the Sloane manuscripts in the British Museum have an account of Robin's life, which states that he was born around 1160 in Lochsirlee in South Yorkshire. Robin became a popular folk hero because of his generosity to the poor and peasants, and his hatred of the sheriff who enforced the forest laws. Some date his adventures as taking place during Edward II, but other versions say the king was Richard I. Robin had fought in the Crusades alongside Richard I before returning to England to find his land had been seized by the sheriff, which he wasn't too happy about. Coming in at number 8, Grindylows. You know, kinda like in Harry Potter. I know, how many Harry Potter references am I gonna make on this channel? Holy! Grindylows are supernatural creatures that appear in the folklore of England, mostly the Lancaster area. They are described as small, non-human entities with scaly skin, a greenish complexion and sharp claws and teeth, and long arms with lengthy fingers at the end. They dwell in ponds and marshes waiting for unsuspecting children, which they then grab them with their strong grip and drag them into the waters. Grindylows have been used as shadowy figures to frighten children away from pools, marshes, or ponds where they could drown. Here at number 7, London Fog. On December 4th in 1952, smog began to cover London. The smog was present for 5 whole days and ended up leading to the passing of at least 4,000 people. On a regular Thursday afternoon, a high-pressure air mass stalled over the Thames River Valley. Suddenly, cold air came in from the west side, and the air in London became trapped. The problem worsened by the low temperatures, which caused people living there to burn extra coal in their furnaces to keep warm. The smoke, soot, and sulfur dioxide from the area's industries, along with the stuff from cars and consumer engine usage, caused heavy smog to smother the city. By the morning of December 5th, it was visible across hundreds of square miles. It became so thick and dense that by December 7th, there was no sunlight and visibility was down to only 5 yards in many places. Eventually, all transportation came to a halt, but not before the smog caused several train accidents, including a collision between 2 trains near London Bridge. However, that wasn't the worst thing. The worst effect of the smog was the respiratory distress it caused in humans and animals, including difficulty breathing and vomiting. A high number of people in the area, numbering in the thousands, passed away in their sleep that weekend. Now, it's a little crazy to me that all this happened and so many people ended up losing their lives. Taking our number 6 spot, Owlman. A small churchyard in Mornin was a sacred spot long before the 13th century church was built there, with views over the Helford River. Sightings of a flying creature about 5 feet tall, half man, half owl, with glowing red eyes, silver feathers, and crab-like claws have terrified tourists since the 1970s. Oddly, all but one of the dozen or so eyewitnesses of the Owlman have been girls or young women, most under 16. So is this a creature that lurks the night, or is it a real person that wants to capture women and hurt them? Halfway at number 5, King Arthur and Excalibur. Still a relatively well-known myth, King Arthur and the Sword in the Stone is a myth of strength and honor. The legend goes that the magician Merlin placed the sword Excalibur in a stone, and whoever removed it would be the rightful king. Then Arthur removed it and went on to defend the country against invaders, along with many other heroic tales. King Arthur is a central figure in English history, and though some of the legends surrounding him may not be true, we do have centuries of literature, so I mean, in medieval times, this one doesn't seem too much of a stretch, but who knows. Number 4, Black Shuck, or Black Dog. The legend is perhaps the most common local myth in Britain. Among the graveyards, by crossroads, in the darkest forests, lurks a fear stirred first in the early medieval times. In Suffolk, this calf-sized hound with glowing red eyes is a harbinger of doom and death. It often appears during electrical storms, such as the one that struck both the churches of Bungay and Blythburgh on the same day at the exact same moment in August 1577. Leaving scorched claw marks on the church door at Blythburgh, and there were at least 2 fatalities. I mean, remember what I said about black dogs in top 10 TikToks that will make you question reality? Which, check out the video if you haven't already, but I mean, I don't know. I love black dogs, but still. Coming in at number 3, red caps. A red cap is a malicious and malevolent goblin creature. They are said to live in the ruined castles along the Scottish borders, murdering those who stray into their homes. They wear red hats that are dyed with their victims' blood. And to keep their hats red, they must hurt others regularly, because if they don't, they won't survive. You can't outrun a red cap and they will always catch you. I mean, go there and see if you can find one, but know that you have been warned. Here at number 2, the Nuclavi. It's said to be the most terrifying creature of Britain. Around the waters of Orkney lives a skinless human horse, a being of rage and pestilence. The Nuclavi has a head of a man, only much bigger. Some people speak of flippers on its legs. The sea-dwelling beast kills crops with its breath and makes livestock sick when it comes onto land, smelling of burning seaweed and set to exact revenge on any helpless soul unfortunate enough to witness its arrival. Like many British monsters, it's said that if you want to escape from its demonic presence, you need to leap across a freshwater stream or river. Taking our number 1 spot, Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper terrorized London in 1888, taking the lives of at least 5 women and disfiguring their bodies in an unusual manner, indicating that the killer had a very good knowledge of human anatomy. The culprit was never captured or even identified, and Jack the Ripper remains one of England's and the world's most infamous criminals. All 5 passings took place within a mile of each other, in or near the Whitechapel district of London's East End, from August 7th to September 10th, 1888. Now, despite having committed these heinous crimes and investigations claiming definitive evidence on their identity, his or her name and motive is still unknown.
At a number 10 spot, we have the Guantanamo's ghost prisoners. The military prison at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, took its first 20 detainees in 2002. Despite various calls to shutter it, it still stands almost 20 years later. It was built in order to house prisoners captured in Afghanistan or other terrorists. At its peak, it housed just under 800 people, with many of the prisoners being detained without any sort of trial. In the early days of the detention camp, many of the prisoners were tortured physically and mentally. So this prison was the real deal and is in many movies and TV shows to this day, and you can probably see the depiction they do on it. Except after all the abuse, death, and injustice, the spirits have been said to be very aggressive in this prison. This is no surprise. Just doing my research on this place alone made me think, how could the US government create this prison in the first place? In short, it's a terrible place for terrible people. But since many were taken here without any sort of trial, I really wonder how many were innocent and actually ended up passing away in this very prison, knowing that they're innocent and they were treated the worst out of any prison in the world probably. At our number 9 spot, with the El Chupacabras. Imagine being in a world where a mysterious creature roams free and just wreaks havoc on livestock, especially when having livestock meant life or death. This is the world that people in Puerto Rico found themselves in during 1995, when the first reported sightings of the El Chupacabras were recorded. The name Chupacabras comes from the Spanish words chupar, which is to suck, and cabras, which is goat, which refers to its common depiction as blood-sucking reptile-like creatures with huge red eyes and sharp quills on its spine. This creature is said to stand 4 feet tall and be similar to a vampire, kangaroo, and wild dog all mashed together. Many people who claim to have seen it say that it's real, but others believe it's completely a legend. The first sighting of the Chupacabras was reported in Puerto Rico in 1995 when a local woman discovered dead livestock that had been drained of their blood. After this, reports of sightings started coming in from various parts of Puerto Rico and other countries, which included the Dominican Republic, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, Colombia, El Salvador, Panama, Peru, and you name it. People claim to have seen the creature attacking and killing their livestock, and even some people reported seeing the creature itself. In 2011, a book called Tracking the Chupacabras was published by Benjamin Radford. Radford concluded that the eyewitness in the original Puerto Rican incident has based her description of the creature on a sci-fi horror film she had seen. After 5 years of investigation, Radford officially denied the existence of such creatures. However, many people still believe that the Chupacabras are real, and sightings did continue to surface afterward in 2018 and 2019. At a number 8 spot, we have the Cuban Missile Crisis. So this is a time when the world almost ended, so this has to be a spot on this list. The 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis is considered to be one of the most intense 13 days of the Cold War, and this is because one single misstep could have meant a whole nuclear destruction all over the world. However, the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, the missile crisis began when US surveillance discovered what the Soviets sanctioned missiles in Cuba. And why did this scare Americans? Well, because Cuba is only 90 miles away from Florida, so the US debated whether to send an air raid or perhaps an invasion of Cuba in order to destroy these supposed missiles. After these intense 13 days of intense negotiations, with everyone a millimeter away from nuking one another, President John Kennedy and the Soviet leader were able to make a deal. To make this even more scarier, a Russian army officer named Vasily Arkhipov is considered to be the man who literally saved everyone on Earth. This is because on October 27, 1962, he was in a nuclear submarine when the US started to use non-lethals to bring their submarines up. They didn't know if this was an act of war, so they were just seconds away from launching a nuclear warhead when Vasily stood up to everyone and demanded not to send it out, possibly saving the entire human civilization. At a number 7 spot with Jaco Santino. The story begins when a traveling farmer who resided near Orkovis in the early 20th century. The man fished till late at night, and on his way home, he lit a jaco to light the way. Unfortunately, the jaco caught fire before the man arrived home. He went through his possessions and discovered a wooden crucifix among them. He lit up the crucifix and used it as a lantern because he was in desperate need of light. The man would die only a few days later after contracting a serious illness. Since he burned the cross, it is said that his spirit was condemned to stay on earth until he finds all the ashes of the sacred crucifix. So the legend says if you see a mysterious light floating around, it is the man with the jaco, and be sure not to disturb his search because they say he's a very aggressive spirit when provoked. At a number 6 spot with Jacinto's well. We're going to talk about a natural well, and from the looks of it, it seems like a nice tourist spot to take photos of, but locals claim a very tragic backstory instead. Back in the day, there was a supposed farmer by the name of Jacinto. Every day he would take his cows out to eat around that area because who wouldn't want to let their cows see this type of views? For some odd reason, Jacinto would ensure no cows would get out of line by using a rope and securing it around his own waist. Probably not the brightest idea in hindsight. This is because on one rainy night, Jacinto happened to be by this well when thunder startled one of his cows. The cow eventually ran into this well, bringing Jacinto down with him. Now it's said that if you go down to this well and shout out his names, the wave below will hit harder and higher. In the hump of our list, we have La Mano Peluda. The legend of La Mano Peluda is a spooky tale that can be heard in almost every Latin American country, but is especially popular in Mexico and Colombia. The story dates back to the Spanish Inquisition and has been passed down through generations of storytellers. The tale has many different versions, but most of them tell the story of a man who was wrongfully accused of a crime and had his hand cut off as punishment. This is when he swore revenge on everyone, and when he died, his hand came back seeking revenge. In the Mexican version of the story, the legend takes place in the year 1908 in Puebla. There was a man named Senor Villa who is known as Horta, and he and his wife, La Gangosa, owned a pawn shop. Horta was a terrible man who ripped off his customers and treated them very badly. After his death, a local newspaper ran a story that a graveyard keeper told them. The graveyard keeper claimed to see a black hairy hand with rings sticking out of Horta's grave. The hand would look for victims to tear out their eyeballs and choke them to death, then return back into Horta's grave. Since then, there has been many reports of people claiming to have seen this hand pulling them out of their bed while sleeping, and others have reported seeing it moving through the field searching for more victims. Other versions of this legend describe the hand as being black, hairy, with sharp nails twice the size of an adult's hand, all while leaving a trail of blood behind it. Maggots can also be seen moving around the hand, and the hand waits for children to get out of bed. At our number 4 spot, we have the Treasure of Lima. The Treasure of Lima is a fascinating legend of a buried treasure that was removed from Lima, Peru in 1820 and never recovered. The treasure is estimated to be worth up to $208 million in today's money. The treasure was originally collected by the Roman Catholic Church in Lima and was intended to be transported to Mexico for safekeeping during the Peruvian War of Independence. Captain William Thompson was put in charge of transporting the riches to Mexico, but he and his crew turned pirates and stole the treasure. They then buried it on Cocos Island off the coast of present-day Costa Rica. Thompson and his first mate were the only ones to survive out of the crew, and they agreed to lead the Spanish to the stolen treasure to save their lives. They took them as far as the Cocos Island and then managed to escape into the jungle. Thomas, the first mate, and the treasure were never seen again. Though it is believed that Thompson returned to Newfoundland with the aid of a whaling ship, Forbes settled in California and became a successful businessman, but never returned to the island. Since that time, hundreds of treasure hunters have traveled to the Cocos Island to find the Treasure of Lima, but none have succeeded and many have lost their lives attempted to find this supposed treasure. One theory is that the treasure was not buried on the Cocos Island at all, but on an unknown island off the coast of Central America. The Costa Rican government does not allow treasure hunting any longer and believes no treasure exists on this island, but people remain convinced. At number 3 spot, we have Duende. In Western Honduras, particularly in Copan Ruinas, there is a terrifying legend that has been passed down from generation to generation. The legend of the El Duende, the goblin. According to the Vejetos, or old folks, El Duende is an evil little man with dark skin who wears an elegant green suit and a big hat or a sombrero. He is said to only appear to single women, particularly on remote roads to rural villages or when women are alone in their houses. The legend goes that El Duende is an enamorado, a playboy who offers gifts and wealth to women in order to entice them to go away with him. Those who accept his offerings become enchanted by his evil powers and suffer consequences such as becoming mute or mentally impaired. If the women do not pay attention to the Duende, he chases them and throws rocks or cow dung at them. The Veto suggests that if El Duende appears to a woman, the best thing to do is to remain calm, act friendly, and ask him for something impossible, such as an open basket filled with water from a river. The frustration of not being able to fulfill such a request will cause the Duende to disappear and never to return to bother the woman again. Number 2, the house in Pinar del Rio. Although the date of when this house was built is unknown, what is known about it has been abandoned for over 20 years. This property is located right at kilometer 78 of the highway that connects Havana with Pinar del Rio. And every time someone decides to visit this abandoned house, they also come out reporting something very strange and sometimes supernatural. Former residents of the home have all left due to feeling uncomfortable in the house. For example, couples who have stayed slowly begin to argue more and more aggressively. Some have told others that it's impossible to sleep at night because of the constant nightmares you get while in this home. Meanwhile, the residents of this area claim to see strange lights coming from the inside and have seen wild dogs enter the house which are nowhere to be seen after. It is said that the house was originally built for a man named Juan, who is a very lonely man, and eventually the house would start to present supernatural activity once he started living in it. Soon after, he would then go deaf and would live inside of this house with these spirits as his friends. Since the man has passed, the spirits of this house are unwelcoming, and if you dare step foot, you may be putting you and your family's lives in danger. Number 1, Cementerio La Reina. This cemetery is essentially an outdoor crumbling art museum. This was a monument to plantation farming and wealthy trade barons when it first opened in 1800s. Most tombs are crowned with massive statues of beauty and grace. In recent years, the cemetery has fallen into disrepair and has been targeted by many grave robbers. Sleeping Beauty statue is one of the many statues that stands out to many visitors. The story goes that the young woman buried there was promised to an older wealthy plantation owner, but her heart belonged to a young local boy. When her wedding drew near, she ran off and married her true sweetheart. Unfortunately, she died soon after of cholera. Regardless of her betrayal, the older man buried her in the family space and erected a large statue that still stands today, a restless spirit in life and in death. At our number 10 spot, we have almost had a war over a tree. 2 US Army officers named Captain Arthur Boniface and First Lieutenant Mark Barrett were axed and butchered until they passed from North Koreans while trying to trim a tree in the DMZ. This would later be known as the Korean Axe Murder Incident. The tree was blocking a checkpoint view, which is why the US decided to chop it in the first place. As you would expect, when the US caught wind that the soldiers passed away in a foreign country, they quickly took action. They created Operation Paul Bunyan, which is named after a mythical lumberjack from North American lore. The operation was very simple. Go to the DMZ and chop it down, except they came with a little few friends of their own. This included hundreds of soldiers armed with machine guns, grenade launchers, and chainsaws. And if that wasn't enough to make this more American, they brought in a 23 vehicle convoy with a tank, 20 utility helicopters, and 7 attack helicopters. Oh, you thought I was done? They also brought in B-52s, F-4s, F-5s, F-111s, and also a carrier which was offshore and a nuclear capable bomber circulating in the area. If you guess that the North Koreans didn't do anything, you are right. At number 9 spot, we have videos of nuclear destruction. Okay, first things first, North Korea has no internet. Well, except for high level officials and some schools, but that's pretty much it. This means their media spreads like a wildfire in a desert. The only thing that did catch fire is when North Korea featured a video simulation of a nuclear missile striking with what appears to be somewhere in the United States, as you can see the flag burning by the end of the video. This video was unveiled during a military parade marking the 105th birthday of King Il-sung. This video caused a lot of controversies, especially when it came at a time when the tensions were super high between the US and the Hermit State. For reference, this was in 2017, and by that time North Korea had done a ton of missile testing, and to make things more worrisome, North Korea test launched a suspected suspected intercontinental ballistic missile into the sea this year. At number 8 spot, we have a betrayal at the death camps. North Korea is known for their cruel punishment and their horrendous living conditions. Put these two together and you have some of the worst death camps in the world. Just to give you a little bit of what happens on the inside, many of the prisoners were kept to the brink of starvation. They are forced to do physical demanding labor for hours, torture, subject to chemical experimentation, and sometimes prisoners would be randomly executed, sometimes because the guard didn't like them. One specific story from the Mirror has Shin Dong-hyuk share his experiences in these death camps. When he was 13 years old, he overheard his mother planning to escape the camp. Since he was practically born on the camp, all he knew was to obey and report anything bad in the eyes of North Korea. So he ratted his mom out. He would then recall watching his mom and his brother being dragged out and publicly executed in front of his very eyes. The worst part about this is that at the time he believed he did good because he claimed this is the type of brainwashing he underwent at the camp. At number 7 spot, we have Otter Warmbier. Warmbier was a student from UCLA and decided it was time to go somewhere outside of the box. He then went on a trip to North Korea through a Chinese company called Young Pioneer Tours, which is still one of the biggest tours to this day. In the hotel he was staying at, there was a forbidden floor, but he went there anyway and stole a political poster off the wall. This was all caught on film. This is all because a church in Hawaii that he was a part of wanted him to do it. During his confession speech on February 2016, he said this:
I have been very impressed by the Korean government's humanitarian treatment of severe criminals like myself, and of their very fair and square legal procedures in the DPR Korea.
This is a load of barnacles.
Then on March that same year, he was convicted and sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. Negotiations happened, but it wasn't until June 2017 when North Korea released Otto. Except he was in a coma after taking a sleeping pill. It wasn't until he was flown out to the US where he passed away. After this incident, the US government decided to ban all American tourists from visiting North Korea altogether. Another reason not to visit this place. At number 6 spot, we have North Korean ghost ships. Hundreds of abandoned boats from North Korea wash up on Japanese and Russian coastlines each year. Some of the vessels contain the crew's remains, but they're usually just a pile of bones. These ghost ships are thought to be the result of North Korean fishermen becoming lost at sea and dying from malnutrition or weather exposure. The ships are typically old and lack stronger engines, and I mean, it's from North Korea. They're pretty much still living in the 1980s still. However, after an investigation was done, they found that these boats were actually sent out from China as a way for them to fish illegally in North Korean waters, which violates UN sanctions completely. Right in the Humper list, we have Ryugyong Hotel. Sorry if I mispronounced that. This 105-star hotel in Pyongyang was completed in 1992, but by that time, it didn't function as a hotel at all. The building was hollow-less and had no windows, which meant complete darkness on the inside. Kim Jong-un wanted this hotel to be the biggest and best hotel in the world, but it completely fell short from that goal. It still remains empty to this day. It's literally just a large structure just overlooking the city, and it's more scary to think that no one actually goes into that building. And in fact, this is the world's tallest unoccupied building. Now many theorists have claimed this building isn't empty and it harbors something more sinister inside. This may be a stretch, but online communities have mentioned that SCPs and other governmental projects are being kept secret in this building, hence why it will never truly open up to the public. At number 4 spot, we have Room 39. Room 39 is a secretive North Korean organization that figures out ways to get funds for Kim Jong-un. This room is in a ruling workers' party building in Pyongyang. The main goal of this room is basically to make sure that Kim and his family never run out of funds, and most of these ways are through illegal means. Legally, they invest in many different precious metals and currencies and some companies, but illegally, which is where they make most of their money, they allegedly make their money through means of narcotics, human trafficking, and most famous, counterfeiting money. The North Koreans are so good at creating counterfeit US dollars that they created a super note, which is supposedly 1-for-1 of a US $100 bill. Some people in the US have actually been prosecuted for distributing the money that was produced in this very room. This room also serves as a place for arms dealing, where they usually sell to terrorist organizations and dictators for money. At our number 3 spot, we have Kim Jong-il's tomb. His tomb is on this list because it just gives everyone other than North Koreans the utter creeps. The mausoleum contains the embalmed body of North Korea's late leader Kim Jong-il, and it was open to tourists for some time. During that time, you could see the leader in this glass box with his body resting inside. Just a creepy sight to see in general, let alone a dictator who causes people to suffer. At number 2 spot, we have the Shincheon massacre. Now before I get started with this one is all up for speculation. North Korea has said this happened while the US has said it was falsified, but forget about what we care about, let's just care about the North Korean side right now. They claim that a mass murder took place in the 1950s during the Korean War. In the town of Shincheon, American soldiers supposedly took the lives of over 35,000 civilians civilians in the course of 52 days. If this was true, this would make it one of the most deadliest massacres in history, but that's if. Now this event is memorialized in the Shincheon Museum of American War Atrocities. Yup, there's a museum on horrible violent acts, and some of the paintings in here are pretty disturbing. At our number 1 spot, we have an election. This one is probably the least scariest on this list, but the fact that people have no right to vote for their leaders is definitely terrifying for me at least. Voting in North Korea is actually a thing. When you're supposed to go in for voting, many people show up super early to show a sign of loyalty. But when they're there to vote, it's just mandatory to vote for the SPA party, otherwise known as the Supreme People's Assembly. There's also supposedly private voting booths, but seriously, what do you have to hide? If you do attempt to vote for someone else, the police will follow you and find any ways to incriminate you or declare you insane.
Starting off at number 10, Loch Ness Monster. Of course, Nessie has to come first.
From the beginning, it was Nessie who wanted me there.
Nessie? You nicknamed my daughter after the Loch Ness Monster?
Almost everyone knows the story of the monster in the lake that people have been trying to spot for thousands of years. The first recorded spotting was in 565, but few have actually seen it. The world took an interest in this myth in the 1930s, when the first photograph was released claiming that this was the Loch Ness Monster. In 1933, Alec Campbell reported a sighting by Aldi McKay of what she believed to be Nessie. Mr. Campbell's report described a whale-like creature in the loch's waters, cascading and churning. Then in 1934, a British surgeon, Colonel Robert Wilson, claimed he took a photograph of the monster while driving along the northern shore of Loch Ness. I mean, we have only discovered like 5% of the water on Earth, so maybe there's something lurking deep down, but what do you guys think? Is she real? Is she all just a hoax? Now at number 9, Robin Hood. Legend has it Robin Hood was an outlaw living in the Sherwood Forest with his merry men. The first known literary reference to Robin Hood and his men was in 1377, and the Sloane manuscripts in the British Museum have an account of Robin's life, which states that he was born around 1160 in Lochsirlee in South Yorkshire. Robin became a popular folk hero because of his generosity to the poor and peasants, and his hatred of the sheriff who enforced the forest laws. Some date his adventures as taking place during Edward II, but other versions say the king was Richard I. Robin had fought in the Crusades alongside Richard I before returning to England to find his land had been seized by the sheriff, which he wasn't too happy about. Coming in at number 8, Grindylows. You know, kinda like in Harry Potter. I know, how many Harry Potter references am I gonna make on this channel? Holy! Grindylows are supernatural creatures that appear in the folklore of England, mostly the Lancaster area. They are described as small non-human entities with scaly skin, a greenish complexion and sharp claws and teeth, and long arms with lengthy fingers at the end. They dwell in ponds and marshes waiting for unsuspecting children, which they then grab them with their strong grip and drag them into the waters. Grindylows have been used as shadowy figures to frighten children away from pools, marshes, or ponds where they could drown. Here at number 7, London Fog. On December 4th in 1952, smog began to cover London. The smog was present for 5 whole days and ended up leading to the passing of at least 4,000 people. On a regular Thursday afternoon, a high-pressure air mass stalled over the Thames River Valley. Suddenly, cold air came in from the west side, and the air in London became trapped. The problem worsened by the low temperatures, which caused people living there to burn extra coal in their furnaces to keep warm. The smoke, soot, and sulfur dioxide from the area's industries, along with the stuff from cars and consumer engine usage, caused heavy smog to smother the city. By the morning of December 5th, it was visible across hundreds of square miles. It became so thick and dense that by December 7th, there was no sunlight and visibility was down to only 5 yards in many places. Eventually, all transportation came to a halt, but not before the smog caused several train accidents, including a collision between 2 trains near London Bridge. However, that wasn't the worst thing. The worst effect of the smog was the respiratory distress it caused in humans and animals, including difficulty breathing and vomiting. A high number of people in the area, numbering in the thousands, passed away in their sleep that weekend. Now, it's a little crazy to me that all this happened and so many people ended up losing their lives. Taking our number 6 spot, Owlman. A small churchyard in Morton was a sacred spot long before the 13th century church was built there with views over the Helford River. Sightings of a flying creature about 5 feet tall, half man, half owl, with glowing red eyes silver feathers, and crab-like claws have terrified tourists since the 1970s. Oddly, all but one of the dozen or so eyewitnesses of the Owlman have been girls or young women, most under 16. So is this a creature that lurks the night, or is it a real person that wants to capture women and hurt them? Halfway at number 5, King Arthur and Excalibur. Still a relatively well-known myth, King Arthur and the Sword in the Stone is a myth of strength and honor. The legend goes that the magician Merlin placed the sword Excalibur in a stone, and whoever removed it would be the rightful king. Then Arthur removed it and went on to defend the country against invaders, along with many other heroic tales. King Arthur is a central figure in English history, and though some of the legends surrounding him may not be true, we do have centuries of literature, so I mean, in medieval times this one doesn't seem too much of a stretch, but who knows. Number 4, Black Shuck, or Black Dog. The legend is perhaps the most common local myth in Britain. Among the graveyards, by crossroads, in the darkest forests, lurks a fear stirred first in the early medieval times. In Suffolk, this calf-sized hound with glowing red eyes is a harbinger of doom and death. It often appears during electrical storms, such as the one that struck both the churches of Bungay and Blytheburg on the same day at the exact same moment in August 1577. Leaving scorched claw marks on the church door at Blytheburg. And there were at least 2 fatalities. I mean, remember what I said about black dogs in top 10 TikToks that will make you question reality? Which, check out the video if you haven't already, but I mean, I don't know. I love black dogs, but still. Coming in at number 3, redcaps. A redcap is a malicious and malevolent goblin creature. They are said to live in the ruined castles along the Scottish borders, murdering those who stray into their homes. They wear red hats that are dyed with their victims' blood. And to keep their hats red, they must hurt others regularly, because if they don't, they won't survive. You can't outrun a redcap and they will always catch you. I mean, go there and see if you can find one, but know that you have been warned. Here at number 2, the Nuclavi. It's said to be the most terrifying creature of Britain. Around the waters of Orkney lives a skinless human horse, a being of rage and pestilence. The Nuclavi has a head of a man, only much bigger. Some people speak of flippers on its legs. The sea-dwelling beast kills crops with its breath, and makes livestock sick when it comes onto land. Smelling of burning seaweed and set to exact revenge on any helpless soul unfortunate enough to witness its arrival. Like many British monsters, it's said that if you want to escape from its demonic presence, you need to leap across a freshwater stream or river. Taking our number 1 spot, Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper terrorized London in 1888, taking the lives of at least 5 women and disfiguring their bodies in an unusual manner, indicating that the killer had a very good knowledge of human anatomy. The culprit was never captured or even identified, and Jack the Ripper remains one of England's and the world's most infamous criminals. All 5 passings took place within a mile of each other, in or near the Whitechapel district of London's East End, from August 7th to September 10th, 1888. Now, despite having committed these heinous crimes and investigations claiming definitive evidence on their identity, his or her name and motive is still unknown. Starting off this countdown at number 10, the Singapore Stone. Did you know that Singapore has its very own Hercules? Known as Bedang, a poor fisherman lived his humble life by the Singapore River. When he realized a water djinn had been stealing his fishes, he set a trap to catch the spirit red-handed. He then confronted the captured spirit, who promised to grant his wish in return for its release. Bedang proceeded to wish for superhuman strength, and was soon appointed court warrior by the Sultan of Singapore. Warriors from far and wide started swarming in to challenge the strong man, including India's Wadi Bajaya. The 2 dueled in a series of contests, and the last one saw them lifting a massive rock and throwing it towards the Singapore River. The rock was discovered years later at the spot where it was said to have landed, and not just that, there was an inscription on it, probably to commemorate Bedang's achievement. However, only a fragment of the rock survives today, and as it's been said, the Brits blasted it to pieces in 1843. While it's housed in the temporary closed National Museum of Singapore, you can still see it online.
Barely a meter wide, the Singapore Stone is a fragment of a large sandstone slab that once stood at the mouth of the Singapore River. Blown up in 1843 to widen the passageway of the river mouth, this fragment is believed to be over 1,000 years old.
Number 9, Red Hill. Red Hill has a bloody tale behind its name. As strange as it sounds, it all started with a swordfish infestation, where the sea creatures attacked unsuspected villagers and fishermen by the shore. An idea came out of using banana tree trunks as a barricade to trap the swordfishes. He brought this up to the Sultan, who granted permission to proceed. The brilliant plan worked, earning him the respect and admiration of the villagers, but not the Sultan, who soon became envious of the attention. Out of jealousy, he ordered his men to rid the boy. even taking his life by any means necessary. And so they did. The poor boy's blood flowed down the hill where he lived, staining it blood red. And so that's how it's said it's got its name. Number 8, Kusu Island. An island with an interesting backstory is Kusu Island, also known as a sacred site. The island is home to a Chinese temple and 3 Malay shrines. But do you know where it gets its name from? Kusu means turtle in Hokkien. And legend has it that a giant turtle transformed into the island to save stranded sailors and fishermen, victims of the stormy weather. The sailors and fishermen returned the following year and the year after with offerings to show their gratitude. From then on, people head down on the 9th month of the lunar calendar to pay their respects. Number 7, Radin Ma. Radin Ma is the name of the area between Teluk Bangla, Bukit Permi, and Jalan Bukit Merah. Sorry if I mispronounced any of that. As well as a couple of known landmarks around the city. It's also the name of a Javanese princess, Radin Ma Ayu. Her father was a warrior prince, her mother was a commoner, and their marriage was condemned by the Sultan. One day, while the warrior prince was away on an expedition, the Sultan ordered his men to burn their house down, killing his wife. Radin, however, was saved by a loyal servant. Upon his return, the devastated warrior prince left the Javanese kingdom for Temasek with his baby daughter. Soon after their arrival, the Sultan of Temasek arranged for the warrior prince to marry his daughter. Similar to the tale of Cinderella, Radin's new stepmother wasn't a big fan of hers. The plot thickens when the adult Radin was to marry her stepmother's nephew, whom she refused. Not liking her decision, he attacked her main man in life, her father. In an attempt to save him, Radin was hurt in the process, receiving a stab in the heart. It's said that her body is laid to rest at the foot of Mount Faber, where there's a shrine in respect of her loyalty. Number 6, Island of Death. Tlaumati, or Island of Death, was a former name of Sentosa. While no one knows exactly just how the island got its morbid name, it's been said that the island was once a place of piracy and bloodshed. Other reasons behind its name include the location of the island, which was adjacent to Palu Brani, which was the burial ground for many ancient Malay warriors. Then there's a tale about a deadly outbreak called the Blakang Mati fever in the late 1840s, which almost wiped out the original Bugis settlers on the island. In 1972, Palu Mati was renamed as Sentosa, or Peace and Tranquility, leaving its past behind. Today, it's a beach resort known as the State of Fun. Halfway number 5 is Singapura. Sang Nila Utama, or Sri Tribhuwana, was once the ruler of the Shivajaya Empire at Sumatra. According to legends, he went on an expedition in the late 13th century and discovered an island with a white sandy shore. After learning that the place was called Temasek, Sang decided to cross the waters to reach this newly discovered land. However, a storm appeared out of nowhere and nearly swallowed the boat. In a desperate attempt, Sang threw his crown into the turbulent waters. The weather and the sea immediately became calm, and the crew reached Teluk Blangah safely. As they landed, a strange beast was spotted from afar. Upon hearing that it was a lion, Sang was overjoyed and decided to name the island Sigapura, or Lion City. The discovery was said to have happened in and around AD 1297, and Sang went on to rule for 48 years before his passing. His palace and burial ground was located on top of Bukit Larangang, or Forbidden Hill. Number 4, Sisters Islands. Lying south of Sentosa, Sisters Islands refer to Palu Sabar Darta and Palu Sabar Lut. Many years ago, there was a pair of sisters, Mina and Lena, living by the southern coast of Singapore. Being very attached to each other, the sisters vowed to marry 2 brothers so that they could live together always. However, one night, Lena ran into a group of pirates by the sea. Stunned by her beauty, the pirate chief was determined to marry Lena. When the dawn broke, the pirates came and abducted Lena to their ships. Weeping over the loss of her dear sister, Mina came swimming after the boats. The stormy waters were merciless, and she was doomed eventually. In a desperate attempt, Lena broke free and dived into the sea. The next day, a pair of islands appeared where the sisters had drowned. They were named Sisters Islands by the villagers in memory of the 2 girls.
And legend has it that the next day, after the storm had subsided, Sisters Islands had appeared in the position where the 2 sisters were last seen.
Number 3, Underwater City. Legend has it that Sang Nila Utama was the child between an adventurer king and a princess of an underwater kingdom, like we talked about before. Supposedly, Sang's father Raja had a glass case created for him to descend into the sea because he was curious about what lies beneath the calm waters. He sank into a country called Dika and was greeted by a race of men, and was later taken to meet the ruler of this underwater wonderland. And that's exactly how he met Sang's mum, Princess Mathabu Labari. This world under the sea, however, is scarcely ever mentioned in history books. Number 2, the Merlion. One night, the villagers living by the southern coast of Tesamek were awakened by the howling winds and crashing waves. The dark clouds blocked out the lights of the moon and the stars, turning the world in complete darkness. It was as though the island of Tesamek would be sunk by the raging sea. The terrified villagers got down on their knees and prayed. During this moment, a bright light was observed emerging from the southern waters. A massive creature, half lion, half fish, roared in anger. The battle between the fierce men mythical animal in nature was intense, as the sky was filled with flashing lightning. The villagers had never witnessed such terrifying phenomenons before. After some time, the winds began to die down. The waves subsided and the sky started to clear. The gigantic sea beast had won the battle against nature. As it claimed its victory, it stood proudly on Sentosa. By morning, the Merlion had retreated into its waters, leaving behind a bright, colorful trail. Number 1, ghostly passengers. This story originates with taxi drivers, specifically ones who have had the eerie experience of picking up late-night passengers who ask to be dropped off at a cemetery. Usually, the protagonist in the story is a beautiful young woman waiting on a remote road for a taxi. Once she's in the taxi, she doesn't speak again and wordlessly hands the driver money when she arrives at her destination. In the morning, when the driver looks at the money, it's hell notes. Money burnt as an offering have replaced the Singaporean bills. Starting off this countdown at number 10, the Meg. Researchers have pinned the date of the megalodon's extinction to about 2.6 million years ago, roughly when the great white shark was just becoming established. However, a doctor pointed out that the megalodon likely lived in water no more than 200 meters deep, in and around coastal areas. We would, she says, have noticed something of the megalodon's size if it was swimming off our shores. But what if that's not where it's living? Explorers began to probe the Mariana Trench in the late 1800s using rudimentary equipment, but it was impossible to get the full picture of the trench without sending someone down. That's only happened once in history. In 1960, a researcher and US Navy lieutenant took a Navy submarine into the depths. Due to the pressure, they couldn't stay very long, but when they turned on the submarine's floodlights, they were shocked to see fish. Until then, it was thought that no creature could live in such a harsh environment. So who's to say the Meg couldn't live down there?
Over the years, reports of megalodon sightings have emerged all over the internet. A lot of them claim that these giant sharks never went extinct, that they've just been hiding in the deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench.
Now at number 9, new whale. In 2016, marine biologists studying the Mariana Trench heard a strange sound of unknown origin and started recording. Although the recording is only a few seconds long, experts detected a slightly metallic quality to it, and many speculated that the noise was not natural. After months of analysis, however, the scientists believed they found the source of the noise. It's currently theorized that the sound, which marine biologists call a biotwang, is the low-frequency call of a new type of baleen whale. However, that's just one theory. Others say it's still a whale, however, it's got shark-like teeth and has mutated into something unimaginable. Here at number 8, sea devil anglerfish. If a fish has the word devil in its name, it's a safe bet that it's going to be freaky, and sea devil anglerfish does not disappoint. It features a whole list of interesting, strange characteristics. As its name strongly hints, this is a fish that would have swum up straight from hell, with its weird body, razor-like teeth, and cold death stare. Although they're bizarre and scary looking, at least they're not huge. Females generally top out at 8 inches long, and the males are much smaller, at maybe an inch long or so. As an anglerfish, the sea devil doesn't dart after its prey. Instead, it has a protrusion from its forehead that dangles a glowing lure to attract unlucky animals. With its huge gaping jaws, the sea devil can actually devour creatures larger than itself.
We believe that this is the first video footage ever made of this species alive and at depth. Eyes of this angler are quite small. In their dark habitat, anglerfish rely more on feeling the movements of other animals in the water around them than on vision. The tiny pale dots you see along the sides of the fish and on its head are organs very sensitive to the slightest movements, and they function very effectively.
Now coming in at number 7, goblin shark. The goblin shark is a rare species of shark. Its unusual and creepy appearance is often described as fossil-like. It has pink-toned skin and a distinctive snout shape. It is elongated and flat, with a protruding jaw and skinny, incredibly sharp teeth. They can grow to be about 10 to 13 feet in length, and they are rarely seen by human beings. It's still unclear what the unusual snout is for, but the older they get, the deeper they dive.
Most goblin sharks are 10 to 12 feet long, but they can grow much bigger.
Here at number 6, telescope octopus. The telescope octopus is a transparent 8-armed octopus that is almost entirely colorless. Their arms are the same size, and they are the only octopus to have tubular eyes. It is incredibly unusual to observe and was originally documented by Dr. William Evans in 1885. The octopus is a rare species, meaning there is little that scientists and the general public know about the marine creature, but it's believed to be a close relative of the glass octopus. These eyes provide a wider peripheral vision so that the octopus can see predators and prey alike. Those eyes can also rotate. Talk about scary. Halfway at number 5, fang-toothed fish. These fish could be straight out of a horror movie and are named after their scary teeth that in relation to their body size are the largest in the ocean. Special pouches on the roof of its mouth prevent the teeth from piercing the fish's brain when its mouth is closed. Fang-toothed fish do not have good eyesight and they are believed to hunt by literally bumping into their prey, sensing vibrations and movement in the water. Now at number 4, deep sea hatchetfish. There are a lot of odd looking fish in the sea, but not many of them resemble humans' hand tools. The deep sea hatchetfish resembles a silvery swimming hatchet. There are more than 40 species of hatchetfish. All of them have ridiculously skinny bodies and many of them have shiny scales too, which adds to the metallic hatchet-like appearance. They are small fish and even the biggest types to grow only to about 6 inches long. Their delicate looks contradict their serious ruggedness because these fish are found in depths pushing nearly 5,000 feet. Hatchetfish have bioluminescent bodies and they can alter the brightness of their glow depending on how much light is filtering from above. In doing so, they're counter-illuminating their bodies in a clever camouflage technique. Their dim, self-produced light reduces their silhouettes, making it much more difficult for predators to spot them from below. Now at number 3, comb jellyfish. The comb jelly is a beautiful oval-shaped animal with 8 rows of tiny comb-like plates that it beats to move itself through the water. As it swims, the comb rows break up light to produce a shimmering rainbow effect. Comb jellies are gelatinous creatures with luminous body structures as they diffract any light that falls upon them. They use their comb-like plates to move around in the water. While they please the eyesight, these underwater marvels are vicious predators, even attacking their own kind sometimes. Some may be as tiny as a few millimeters, ranging up to nearly 5 feet long.
Found around 3,000 feet down are the comb jellies. That's light refracting off thousands.
Here at number 2, frilled shark. The frilled shark was discovered in the 19th century by a German who studies fish. It is often referred to as a living fossil due to its eerie appearance and the shape of its mouth. The shark has an eel-like body that's dark brown and gray in color, and the articulation of the jaws to the head. The shark derives its name from 6 rows of frilly gills that grace its body, which grows up to 6 feet long. Just as notably, the shark wields more than 20 rows of wicked, trident-shaped teeth that will tear into any bit of flesh that passes near them. Frilled sharks probably spend most of their lives near the ocean's bottom, and they like waters more than 4,000 feet deep. On the rare occasions that people snag them and bring them up to the surface, the sharks almost always perish immediately, making it very difficult for people to observe their behavior and life cycles. For years, many people assumed that frilled sharks swam and hunted like eels. Now coming in at number 1, zombie worms. Now I know what you're thinking, oh well, how can a worm be scary? Well, let me tell you. Zombie worms are also known as osedox. The word osedox means bone eater in Latin and refers to the worm's ability to dig into and eat bones from whale carcasses. They do so in an attempt to reach lipids enclosed in the bone. They use special root tissues for bone burrowing. So if you ever come near one of these things, I suggest getting as far away as possible.
At a number 10 spot, we have the Torch Lake Monster. This one is pretty much well known all over Michigan, but for those who don't know, the tale of the Torch Lake Monster dates back to the early 1960s and 70s. Obviously, it takes place in Torch Lake, which is located in North Michigan, and it also is the second largest lake in the state. A fisherman and coach by the name of Dave Foley is credited with spotting the creature first and telling the stories of it since he worked by the lake for a while. Legend goes that the giant creature has a lizard's body, the head of a cat, 1 brown eye, and 1 blue eye, along with slimy green skin. The lake is approximately 285 feet deep, which makes what lies underneath much more scary and worrisome. Nighttime is when this creature is said to arise from the depths. At this time, many swimmers and boats go missing, only to wash ashore with no evidence of its demise. At a number 9 spot, we have the singing sands of Beat Gris. Located just past Lac La Belle, Michigan, is a beautiful white sandy beach known as Beat Gris. In a direct translation, this means gray beast, and that's because a large gray creature was said to have inhabited the area many years ago, but that's not even the story I'm going to talk about. Local legends claim that the pure white sand of the beach sings by pressing down your palms on it, or it barks when you strike it. The sound is said to be the voice of a Native American maiden who lost her lover when he drowned in the Great Lakes, and now she calls him on shore. The sand is said to lose its magical singing power when it's removed from the beach. Now visitors claim to hear the singing sounds, but as many try to bring the sound back home, 2, they are met with years of unlimited bad luck, which lead many to bring it back to the beach to allow it to sing again. Other than sand that makes sounds, at our number 8 spot with the Belle Isle's Lady in White. In Detroit, Michigan, there's an island called Belle Isle. This 982-acre island is used for picnics, hikes, and home of the only marble lighthouse. Other than that, everything else on this island is shrouded in mystery and up for speculation. Legend of the island follows the story of a chief's daughter and a haunting bridge. The chief was concerned that his daughter's beauty would attract vast amounts of suitors, so to combat this, he made a deal with the snake goddess of the island. The chief asked the goddess to protect his daughter. The goddess would agree, but not for nothing. She would ask for the daughter to live out the rest of her days on the island to protect it, never being able to leave it. And to this day, the daughter is said to stay on this island and walk it, with many visitors reporting that she would try to lure them into the forest by telling them that she is looking for someone and just needs help. She supposedly takes her victims to the bridge to drown them, and it's said that if you go on this bridge and honk 3 times, she will appear just before your eyes. At number 7 spot with the Nain Rouge. It's said that since the city of Detroit was founded in Michigan, bad luck has befallen the area. This is all because of the devilish red imp known as the Nain Rouge had cursed the entire city. Local folklore suggests that the Detroit's founder, Antoine de la Mothe Cadillac, was warned by a fortune teller that he would come face to face with the Nain Rouge and to treat him with the most utmost respect and attention. Except this information came straight this ear and right out the other, because when he finally met with this creature, he hit it with his crane and told it to stay out of his way. This is when the angry Nain Rouge cursed the city of Detroit and Cadillac. Shortly after this, Cadillac would lose his fortune and move back to France, but misfortune still occurred in the city. It's said that in all disastrous events that happened in Detroit, the Nain Rouge could be spotted just before all of them. For example, in 1763, 50 British soldiers perished from Native Americans, after which the Nain Rouge could be seen dancing in the aftermath in joy. Then in the surrender of the war in 1812, the Nain was blamed again for its presence. It also been seen during Detroit's riots of 1967 and 1976's ice storm that caused electricity to go out for days. At a number 6 spot with the Masonic Temple. Currently standing as the largest Masonic temple in the world, it also stands as one of the most haunted places in all of Michigan. The temple, designed by George D. Mason, is an imposing Gothic structure at the corner of Bagg Street, later Temple Street, and 2nd Avenue across from Cass Park. The temple has over 1,000 rooms, secret stairways, and concealed passages, but unfortunately Mason would go a little too far in this construction where it would cause him to go bankrupt, eventually losing his wife in the process. His depression slowly kicked in, and then he would jump off the roof of this temple to his death. And to this day, security guards claim to see old George's ghost climbing those steps to the rooftop. Visitors also reported many noises such as doors and windows being slammed shut. They also see moving shadows and experience cold spots all around the area, all while feeling as if they're being watched by something. Right in the hub of our list, we have the Michigan Triangle. Well, guess Michigan has their own version of Bermuda's Devil Triangle, and it contains just as much unexplained phenomena as Bermuda. The triangle goes from Manawak, Wisconsin to Ludington to Benton Harbor in Michigan. It was in early spring 1937 when Captain Donner was just managing his freighter ship called the O.S. McFarland through these icy waters. He was so tired, so he decided to go to sleep and asked for one of the crewmates to wake him up when they approached shore. As they did, they noticed his room was locked, so they looked around, but nothing. They then kicked the door down and found that he vanished with no signs whatsoever. Now the triangle claims the lives of many ships and planes just like Bermuda. People have also cited the O.S. McFarland, but as they try to get a closer look, it disappears into the waters. An odd thing about this place is when divers go to check the wreckages of ships and planes, they notice that everything is still intact, including the bodies of the deceased and the ship as a whole. This is by far the scariest triangle because there is no way around it other than land. So basically, there's no point in traveling in Michigan's Great Lakes. At our number 4 spot is Hell's Bridge. Back in the early 1900s, an old deranged man named Elias Friss led a group of kids to the bridge and proceeded to murder each and every single one of them, slowly throwing them into the river below. Eventually, he was caught and hung by the towns. Before he passed away, he made a confession claiming that he did this because he was possessed by the devil and they told him to do it. To this day, a lot of visitors to the bridge hear the screams and the cries from the children just before they pass away. People have also said that when they get home from this place, they find bruises on their body as if someone was reaching out to grab them or hit them. The worst part is that if you walk on this bridge at night, you can feel hands below you as if they're grabbing you from the river below. And at the end of the bridge, you might encounter Elias as a dark figure with glowing eyes, so you won't miss him in the dead of night. In more lesser known news, apparently you're able to sell your soul to the devil by meeting the devil in the middle of this bridge. I mean, mean, it's called Hell's Bridge. What else did we expect? At a number 3 spot, we have the Dogman. The Dogman is described as a 7-foot tall, amber-eyed, bipedal, canine-like creature, and he has the head of a dog with the body and torso of a human. Ever since its original sighting in 1887, many more sightings were spotted all over Michigan. It's primarily spotted in the northwestern quadrant of the Lower Peninsula. Back to its original sighting back in 1887. This is when the Dogman was discovered by 2 lumberjacks who saw this creature in the distance. Things got a little more concerning when in 1937, Robert Forney was attacked by 5 wild dogs, describing that of one of the dogs allegedly stood up like a bipedal and was significantly larger than all the other dogs. This legend got more popular when disc jockey Steve Cook recorded a song called The Legend, which describes the Michigan's Dogman. Although the artist claims it was made for an April Fool's joke, this kickstarted the entire legend, and sightings of the Dogman would only rise after the song was released. At a number 2 spot with Melonhead. Locals' fear of humanoids called the Melonheads. First theorized in the 1970s, Melonheads are said to be completely bald with misshapen bulbous heads, deformed arms and legs, teeth like daggers, and luminous red eyes. Legend goes that Melonheads reside around Felt Mansion, which is home to Dora Felt, who is an American inventor. The Melonheads were said to be the children suffering from hydrocephalus, which causes your head to expand in some cases. They were located at the Junction Insane Asylum near the home, and it's said that they endured months and months of abuse, and that one day they decided to escape and run into the forests of Michigan, where they became animal-like and very feral. Many of these Melonheads are said to be looking for the doctor who failed to care for them in order to take his life. At a number 1 spot, we have Eloy Psychiatric Hospital. Located in Westland, Michigan, it was named after Detroit's postmaster Elois Davik. In 1839, it started as a poorhouse and a farm where the poor, the sick, and the needy would go for shelter and work. As time went on, the poorhouse transitioned into a psychiatric asylum and hospital. The buildings were self-sufficient, even having their own police. They were even one of the first hospitals in the world to use x-rays for diagnosis, so at least one good thing came out of here. At its peak, the place housed over 10,000 patients and over 2,000 staff members. After its closure in 1984, the hospital's abandoned grounds are said to have a few patients still left inside of it. Ghost patients, that is. There have been reports of people finding medical waste and other strange items. Some have reported finding jars containing human body parts, as well as documents outlining strange medical procedures.